So things have been heating up for the Chiefs today, from signing their franchise kicker to a top-of-market extension to players getting chippy during training camp practice. It's safe to say these guys are ready to play in a real game ASAP, so let's talk about the biggest highlights and standouts as KC gets ready for their first preseason game, more contract extensions reportedly incoming, and much more. But first, how about those? All right, today the guys are back in pads for a hot summer practice in the Midwest heat, and former Raiders head coach Jon Gruden was seen back out there in Chiefs gear for the second day in a row. It's a bit odd, pretty random if you ask me, especially seeing him in Kansas City Chiefs apparel, but again, he and head coach Andy Reid go way back, being staff mates together on the Packers for 5 years or so in the 90s, and Andy Reid said today it's good to have him up here. Gruden has good input on things because he's very smart, a great football coach, and he's enjoyed having him around overall. Now, those who did not practice today were as follows: linebacker Nick Bolton, elbow; safety Justin Reed, quad; cornerback Kelvin Joseph, hamstring; wide receiver Jaron Hayek, shoulder; defensive end Charles Omenihu, knee; defensive end BJ Thompson, illness; and defensive tackle Derek Nottie, triceps. Both Justin Reed and BJ Thompson are on the NFI list, which is something I did want to correct because the past couple of days I've been saying Justin was on the PUP list. Wrong list. Same outcome so far, though, which is he's remained on the sideline for all of training camp and is yet to practice. Meanwhile, it's just Derek Nottie and Charles Omenihu on the PUP list currently because cornerback Jaylen Watson and offensive lineman Joe Toney have come off that list since the start of camp. However, from the looks of it, Derek Nottie is healing up nicely and could also find himself off that list sooner rather than later. Another guy on the defensive line that dealt with some groin soreness last week came out for a bit today from practice, and that was defensive tackle Chris Jones. He came out a bit due to a little tweak of his shoulder, a stinger type of thing, per the words and description of Andy Reid when mentioning that injury. He didn't seem overly concerned about it, though, at this point in time, so we shall see how Chris looks tomorrow. Hopefully it is indeed minor, because we just paid that man a lot of money, and he's the best player on the defensive side of the ball. Speaking of the defense, cornerback Jaylen Watson is a guy to keep eyes on as he comes back from the shoulder he had surgery on this past offseason. He shed his yellow "Do Not Touch Me" jersey, no contact jersey yesterday, but that practice wasn't in full pads, and therefore the yellow jersey did come back on him today. That didn't stop him from nearly recording an INT during practice in a 1v1 versus Phillip Brooks, and also didn't stop him from snagging a diving interception off of Mahomes while in coverage on Xavier Worthy. He then jumped to his feet and launched the ball into the crowd in celebration. So it's safe to say Watson is here and hungry to fight for that cornerback 2 spot that is clearly still up for grabs. Then, without Nick Bolton or Justin Reed out there, when the Chiefs' first-team defense walked through their dime personnel, Tranquill was at linebacker, then Jaylen Watson and Nazeeh Johnson were on the outside, and McDuffie in the slot. Hicks was dime safety, and then Chamari Connor and Brian Cook were on top. Then when it came to the base defense, it was Jack Cochrane working in as the Mike linebacker, while Tranquill remained at the will. And that seems like, if possible, they don't want to move Tranquill out of that spot unless they absolutely have to. And more on Drew Tranquill and Jack Cochrane here in a bit, because they got into a little bit of a scuffle today with the offense, but we'll get to that here in a minute. Andy Reid said Jack Cochrane knows every linebacker position. That's why he's filling in at the mic for Nick Bolton. He's smart, athletic, and is a good commander out there getting everyone lined up, so they feel very secure with him in there. Then, it's interesting that so far, even with Jaylen Watson and Nazeeh Johnson both coming back from injuries/rehab, Joshua Williams is still working in with the second-team defense a bit more. He's still sprinkling in with the ones, but was with the second-team defense during walkthroughs. This is also Nazeeh Johnson's first day back in pads in roughly a week, and he recorded a pass breakup in 7-on-7, wanting to stack up good days and stay healthy. Good things there for Nazeeh. Keith Taylor is another cornerback getting work in with the first-team defense, especially with Kelvin Joseph, who was also making his own impression, still sidelined due to that hamstring injury, with Taylor then recording what would have been a coverage sack on Mahomes. Keith Taylor could also be seen out there 1v1 against Xavier Worthy, attempting to jam him at the line of scrimmage. The problem was Worthy got Taylor to commit inside, then broke out, and once he's in open space, that boy gone. He made sure to haul that pass in as well, and this is yet another highlight from the rookie. Then, Keith Taylor was back in this rep here, trying to make a leaping pass breakup as Carson Wentz threw a beautiful pass left side just over his outstretched arms. A solid connect there to Justin Ross, with Wentz threading the needle. Next up, left guard Joe Toney was out there getting some work in, some pad work in at the start of practice as he slowly is getting ramped up, but so far has yet to actually be out there in team drills as the starting left guard, and that's been Mike Caliendo filling in at the left guard spot with the first team offense, at least until he gets back out there. Andy Reid said they were currently working with Toney's doctors on a timeline to return, but are going to keep ramping him up as they go. Next up, Kingsley Suamataia was back out at the starting left tackle spot, and right now, I think it's his position to lose. Of course, we need to see how the preseason goes, but if they didn't believe Kingsley was ready or close to being that guy, I would think there would still be some sort of rotation between him and Wanye with the first team offense, but that's just not happening. Wanye was the left tackle again with the second team offense today, and yeah, they do have a much better idea of Wanye's capabilities in comparison to Kingsley's, so there's a chance they are just giving Kingsley as many reps as humanly possible out there against the first team defense. That has him going against guys like Mike Dana, George Karlaftis, Chris Jones, etc., and going against guys like that of that skill level is definitely going to make you a better player. So, while time will tell regarding the left tackle spot, the scale is currently tipping quite a bit in Kingsley's favor, in my opinion. Kingsley also had a couple 1v1 reps here against Felix and Udike Uzama. The first, he did a great job keeping FAU moving around the outside, would have kept a clean pocket from Mahomes, who would have easily been able to step up. And then on the second rep, it was a bit more even as FAU attempted to drive Kingsley back, though Kingsley held up for the most part. Positive sign there from the rookie. And before I get into some players that were back working today, since we are on the subject of the offensive line, it's worth mentioning that Nate Taylor of The Athletic dropped an article today detailing that the Chiefs are hoping to extend both Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, keeping a major part of the O-line's interior intact. And Pretty Ricky already dropped a bomb last week that the Chiefs were going to be making Creed Humphrey the highest paid center in the NFL within the next few weeks. Then we're also going to be extending Harrison Butker. Now, let's stop there for a second because that happened today. Harrison Butker is now the highest paid kicker in the NFL, and the deal was negotiated between the Chiefs and Butker himself. He had no representation, and they reached a 4-year, $25.6 million extension that includes $17.8 million in guarantees and earns him just a tad more than Justin Tucker and Jake Elliott's $6 million average per year. Butker is now at $6.4 million per year. He's the team's season-long MVP last year, and you're not going to win a Super Bowl without him if he's not on the roster. So you had to get him locked up for years to come. They are in the midst of a dynasty, and he's probably the top 5 most important player out of what? Mahomes, Kelsey, Chris Jones, and maybe a couple other players. Then Harrison Butker is going to be right there. And after this deal was announced, by the way, Butker took to social media and said, "There's no place I'd rather be than the Chiefs, excited to finalize a 4-year extension to the heights." And you really do love to see it. Now, with this extension being announced, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Are you happy to see him here, or would you have preferred to see him walk after his contract year? Anyway, back to Nate Taylor's article about Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey. If they can get both of these guys extended, that's going to be 3 of the 4 big players on contract years, with Nick Bolton being the 4th. However, with Bolton sadly dealing with more injuries at the moment after struggling through much of last year with them, KC might hold off on extension talks with him at the moment. But man, if they can reach an extension with both Trey Smith as well as Creed Humphrey, that would be the best case scenario for the sake of Patrick Mahomes and keeping him protected along the line. My question is, how can they pay Jawan Taylor $20 million a year, then Trey Smith around that same amount, 17 to 20-ish million per year as well, if they reach an extension with him, then pay Creed Humphrey around $14 million per year, that's top of center market money, and on top of all that, also pay Joe Toney $26 million per year next year as well? That is a lot of freaking money tied up just along the offensive line, and if they're somehow able to get a deal done with Trey Smith, a guy who just turned 25 years old, maybe that signals the end of Joe Toney next year, who will then be 33 years old, and you can move on from him next year with just $11 million in dead money. So I will definitely be curious to see what happens there. It's going to be tough because Toney is arguably the best guard in the entire NFL, especially from a pass blocking standpoint over the last 3 years. Either way, Nate Taylor is very plugged into the Chiefs, so the fact that he mentioned Trey Smith in the mix along with Creed Humphrey, I had to bring it up and get your thoughts on the situation. Do you think the Chiefs can afford to pay 4 of their 5 linemen this much money? Or do you think in order to sign Trey Smith, they'd have to let Toney go next year? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. And next up, the 2 players who did return to practice today, we're going back to practice now after talking contracts for a while, were 2 wide receivers Justin Watson, as well as Kadarius Toney. To be honest, Watson did return yesterday and worked in a bit with the second-team offense, but I was curious to see how his foot, that looked fine yesterday, would look today during a full padded practice. Would they limit him at all? And it seems like Watson's foot is indeed fine. Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest reported he was out in team period with a little bit of rep management, but there doesn't seem to be any issue with his foot. So great news there. Then regarding Kadarius Toney, while he did practice today, he ended practice early and was seen riding back to the facility in the front of the cart. It didn't appear that he re-injured anything along his ankle, but was done working. So I'm not sure what to make of that, to be honest. Could he just have been way too hot and needed some electrolytes, or did he actually tweak that ankle a bit more? It was definitely hot out there, so it could have been as simple as needing to hydrate. And that could also be the reason why some players were getting a bit chippy at one point due to the heat. But before I get to that, one of the main ways I see Toney making the roster is by earning the top punt returner spot, because he's probably the most dangerous returner they have. But today, the top 3 return options seen out there were McCole Hardman, Xavier Worthy, and Nico Remigio. I would think Worthy is simply a backup option to McCole, especially if Worthy is to have a big role on the offense. Nico being in the mix as well is good news for him, as he's a guy that's doing all he can at the moment to earn a roster spot. Now, with the weather in the upper 80s during practice and the humidity doing its typical thing in the August summer heat, that might have lended to some players becoming a little bit cranky. If you look at the tail end of this play here, thanks to KC Sports Network, make sure to give them a follow on Twitter. They're posting stuff like this almost every day of camp. You could see Mahomes holding linebacker Drue Tranquill back as he ripped off his helmet and chucked it to the ground. Mahomes walked away with Tranquill wrapped around his arms, bringing him away from the cluster that was going on, and Drue could be seen going on his merry way. However, if you look to the other side here, another linebacker was involved and seen shoving on the left side, also with no helmet on, and that was linebacker Jack Cochrane. Rashee Rice was also on the left side of that mix-up, but with the recording only showing the tail end of this, it's really tough to know exactly what went on there. However, thanks to Pete Sweeney of Arrowhead Pride, we know a little bit more of what went on, and it was this. In an 11-on-11 play, Rice caught a pass from Mahomes, then ended up throwing the football at Jack Cochrane's helmet. Cochrane then, of course, did not like that and shoved Rice. I'm not exactly sure where Drue Tranquill got involved, but I'm sure he came to the defense of Jack Cochrane. He was clearly pissed off about it, and after all this chaos ensued, by the way, Rice ended up throwing up. So I'm not sure if he got hit hard by Jack Cochrane and that caused it, or like last year early on in camp, Rice got a bit affected by the heat and tossed his cookies. Either way, some tempers flared, and somehow Jack Cochrane finds himself in the mix again. If you remember last year during training camp, Travis Kelce could be seen catching this touchdown pass in the red zone and then punching Jack Cochrane in the head after Cochrane attempted to punch the ball out. This very well could have been what Rice was also frustrated with, because an emphasis of the defense during camp is to attempt to punch out the ball as often as possible, which has to be frustrating for the ball carriers. And when you combine that with this happening every single day at camp, then the heat, scuffles are bound to happen. All this ended pretty quickly, and the rest of practice, I believe, went on without incident. So when you have that minor incident in comparison to some of these wild camp fights from other teams having dual practices, this really doesn't seem like that big of a deal at the end of the day. Now, someone could be seen out there making impressive plays, yet making it not look like a big deal at all, was the new punter, Matt Araiza. He spoke to the media today saying he's grateful to be here in Kansas City. In fact, there's no place he'd rather be. He's playing alongside 2 veteran specialists and has 2 veteran special teams coaches, and they've been walking him through all kinds of potential situations, which has been nothing but helpful. Being a left-footed punter is unique in the NFL, with only 4 lefties suiting up in 2023. That has led to a bunch of dropped punts in training camp, per Araiza himself during today's presser, and that's something Araiza hopes continues during the regular season, because that is a huge momentum shifter in a game, especially if the punting team recovers the muffed punt. Then Araiza said he's feeling very confident as a placeholder, saying he's gotten a ton of reps in with Harrison from OTAs all the way throughout training camp, but it's worth noting that Araiza didn't hold in college. He kicked in college, then worked his way up as a punter as well. So He does lack place-holding experience. However, special teams coordinator Dave Toub shared in his presser yesterday that the team hasn't missed a beat with the holds, even though Townsend is gone. Araiza and Butker are in sync and in rhythm, and it's going well. Araiza, says Toub, is well above his skill level as a placeholder, especially considering his lack of experience. On top of that, Matt reportedly was punting 75-yard bombs out there with ease, featuring hang time galore. This play here shows a nice one from Araiza, but also should remind us that McCole Hardman is still quick out there and will be an effective returner, most likely the starting punt returner unless Toney somehow snags that role over him. Next up, two tight ends had a rough go at times today, with both Irv Smith Jr. and Baylor Cupp dropping a pass. I didn't see the drop on camera by Irv Smith Jr., but it couldn't have been worse than this wide open Baylor Cupp drop. That was a perfect pass from Wentz and a tough drop indeed by Cupp. Noah Gray, though, is one who stood out in the tight end room today, catching this floater from Mahomes and turned upfield for some additional yards. This is the second day with the standout Noah Gray play, as yesterday he made this impressive one-handed grab on a Mahomes pass that was thrown behind him, but it mattered not. Then on this play here, Mahomes found another tight end, Travis Kelce, for a short catch on the right side, and Kelce instantly pitched the ball back to Pacheco, who sprinted down the sideline for some additional yards. Trust me, we're going to see that at some point from Kelce at least once this season, and he's just practicing it to make sure his teammates know to be ready at all times, even in a game. And speaking of Pacheco, he could be seen in Wildcat taking a direct snap that sadly didn't end up with many yards here, but I do like to see some creative ways to feature players back there. That's something Pacheco did last season as well. Andy Reid said that so far, Pacheco's doing a nice job, good with it all, from catching passes out of the backfield to pass protection, then, of course, running the football. Quote, no problem for Pacheco is what Andy Reid said about him today at his presser, which basically means he's seen all he's needed to see out of RB1 so far at camp. Meanwhile, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has primarily been getting looks as RB3 with the second-team offense, but could be seen busting off a big run here with a gaping hole on the left side as he continues working and preparing for year 5 with the team. There is certainly a lot going on from practice today, the extension news, the little scuffle. So let me know what stood out most to you in the comments below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?